everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. As always, I'm Bryson Carver, and man, do we have a loaded show on tap for you guys tonight. We're going to get into some NBA, talk about Klay Thompson's return to Golden State to take on my Warriors. Very emotional night for me as a Warriors fan, as well as for all of Dub Nation, all NBA fans out there. My overarching takeaway from that game to start the show. Also, the Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears, man, as this season kind of, I don't want to say gone to hell. It's not gone there quite yet, but it's trending that way. They just fired their offensive coordinator this week, Shane Waldren. What does that mean for Caleb Williams? What does it mean for the Bears moving forward and even beyond this football season? Getting to that. An interesting segment for one of my favorite segments of the week, carving up the context. We're going to be talking about three really poorly run franchises in the NFL, all three of which paid their franchise quarterbacks, and all of which made the right decision for reasons you might actually not have seen on the surface of it. Getting to that, and of course, we're going to get to Bryce's best 10, my top 10 teams in the National Football League coming into Week 11. Spoiler: there's a team that hasn't been on Bryce's best 10 all season long that's going to be on for the first time this year. One that I've doubted for a while, starting to like what I'm seeing. And then one that's going to be on Bryce's best 10 that has never been on in the history of the segment. You're going to want to stay tuned for that later on in today's show. But listen, this has been a crazy week in America. I'm not going to lie. Plus, I do have to say, and this is going to transition me perfectly into my Golden State Warriors rant. This is perfect in terms of, what my teams have done over the last few days. The Vols getting a W, Pittsburgh Steelers getting a win in Washington. The Warriors beat the Celtics on the road and the Thunder on the road, and they beat the Mavs at home last night and Klay Thompson's homecoming. So let's talk about that to start the show. But first, Klay Thompson came home last night and, by the way, was pretty darn solid. 22 points, hit 6 3-pointers in this game. Klay actually, with arguably his best game of the season, he had been shooting in between opening night for Dallas, in which he scored the exact same amount of points he did last night, 22. In between that stretch between the second game and the game before last night, he was shooting something like 30% from three-point range. So Klay was not playing well by any stretch of the imagination. And Klay steps into his old stomping grounds. Obviously, there's the tribute to Klay before the game with the tipping the captain hat, which I thought was a great touch. Shout out to Joe Lacob and the entire Warriors organization and ownership. Just it's a first-class franchise that does first-class things for first-class athletes, which Klay Thompson obviously was for so long in the Bay Area. So I thought the tribute, it was a 10 out of 10, and Klay Thompson certainly appreciated that. The staffers, the fans, it was great. As far as the game itself, shout out to Klay for playing well. But if there's one thing we know about the Golden State Warriors, listen, I'm not going to sit up here and say, oh, clearly the best team in the NBA. Thus far, that appears to be Cleveland, as much as that pains me to say as a guy who hates all Cleveland sports. The Cavs, they haven't lost, and they've dominated basically all of their games thus far at this point in the season. So, kudos to Cleveland. I'll give it where it's due. But deeper than that, for all the depth the Warriors have, and they've got it, the great coach and Steve Kerr, what I thought last night was a validation of is something that I've said, and this is not to take a shot at Klay Thompson when he just played his first game at Golden State as a visiting player, but this franchise is anchored by two men, primarily. There's obviously Steve Kerr. You have the GM and the ownership. It's two men. It's obviously Steph Curry, and it's Draymond Green. Let's start with Draymond briefly. Draymond Green was ridiculous, per usual. Yeah, I hear off about how Draymond Green, how many times have I heard the last 3 to 5 years, the Warriors should move on from Draymond? It's like, I don't know. He's one of the 5 best defensive players on the planet. He's got a DPOY. He's got 4 titles, and the Warriors may not have 2, 3, maybe even any of them without his contributions. I don't know. Call me crazy. The Warriors are way better with him on the floor. And Draymond Green last night, in terms of the defensive end, had 2 blocks in this game. One was a block on a 3-pointer in which he saved in bounds. I think it was DeAnthony Melton who made a layup on the other end. And one came late with about 2 minutes to go. Daniel Gafford, the big for the Dallas Mavericks, going up for a dunk. And Draymond says, get that out of here. Palms it at the rim. And really helps Golden State in that late game run, which we'll get into in just a moment. But if you look what Draymond contributed, he was great per usual. And then he got that bad dude. As I always say, Steph Curry, he's 36 years old. He'll be 37 come March. He may not be the best player in the league anymore. But I can still say he's the best American player. Respect to guys like LeBron and Tatum and Anthony Edwards and Anthony Davis. Steph Curry's still the man. But even if he ain't the best player anymore, even if that's Jokic or Giannis or other guys like that, there is one thing that we know for certain without any shadow of a doubt, is that is Wardell Stephen Curry II is still the baddest man in the game of basketball, and he showed you why with the dagger shot last night. This is the call from the great Kevin Harlan on TNT of Steph's dagger.
Doncic will defend Curry. A screen by Green, the switch to Lively. Three, Curry. Oh!
Steph was fired up. You see what he did. This is a great graphic Alfred put together. This is what Steph Curry did in the final 3 minutes, 10 seconds of the game. 12 points, perfect from the field, 4 for 4, perfect from the three-point line, 2 for 2, perfect from the free throw line, 2 for 2 as well, with some MVP chants, of course, as a little cherry on top, one night, which happens to be the 14th of his career. We can actually show you just a quick little compilation, 14 seconds of 14 nights for one Steph Curry. And we did this, of course, in chronological order just to be historically accurate to what this man has done constantly and terrorized teams over the course, really, since that celebration was invented. You see, there's the one in the Olympics against France. It was a beautiful thing to watch. The whole country was rooting for Steph at that point, which was incredible. But Steph is a guy, he's averaged 27 minutes. Just 27 minutes over the first 10 games this year. Steph missed a few of them due to injury, but Steph on average, 27 minutes per game. Last night, 35 minutes played. So this was obviously, and Draymond talked about on his podcast with Baron Davis, the Draymond Green Show, which is a great podcast. He said that, Steph was going to talk to the fans, give a speech to the fans prior to the game, hit up Klay Thompson the night before, and according to Draymond, Klay ghosted him. Klay didn't respond back. And so Steph's like, okay, listen, that's still my brother. I love him. Splash Brothers for life. But I'm going to make him pay. Remember, there's a moment, second quarter, for those that didn't see it. Klay hits a three, does a little shimmy, a little Steph Curry shimmy. Steph is over there. He's about to check in the game. He's at the scorer's table, just kind of grinning, like, I'm going to get this guy. I'm going to get this guy. And, of course, he did late in that basketball game. Is that when you look at a Warriors team, which is across the board top 5 in basically everything, we could show you the numbers right here. They're one of the 2 or 3 best teams of basketball, at least to start the year. Second in offensive rating, second in points per game, second in rebounds per game, although I thought size was a problem. Interesting. Second in rebounds. Third in assists per game, fifth in defensive rating, third in net rating, second best record in the NBA now. Much to my chagrin, they're second in basically all those categories, or third to the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are off to a pretty incredible start. But what I've said about this Warriors team coming this year was pretty simple. I don't know if they'll be a contender. I was a little skeptical. I just knew they were better than last year. And I knew it was good that they moved off of Klay Thompson. So Klay, reportedly the Warriors did want him back. We talked about this during the offseason on the show, but at a reduced price. And we know, again, Draymond, Brian Windhorst, not Draymond. Brian Windhorst talked about on ESPN late last night, early this morning, talking about how, and I've reported this from sources I'm aware of in the Bay Area, that there was a sense of Klay was almost distant from the team. The last 2 years, certainly last year, there's an anecdote against the Clippers. We don't have to get into specifics because I don't want to, make Klay look bad. But there was an instance at the end of the game with the Clippers. Klay makes a post-game or a late game mistake. It was, he doesn't dap up Steph when Steph wants to dap him. But like it kind of boiled over, and then Klay gets put to the bench. Then Klay gets back to the starting lineup. It was just kind of a mess. Warriors wanted him back at a reduced price. Klay's like, there's a team that just made the finals. They want me to be a starter, and they want to pay me more money. I think I'm going to go there, which I don't fault Klay for. Matter of fact, I encourage it. Listen, you're at the late stage of your career. Klay Thompson is in year 14. You go get your money and you get your money. I advise that to any athlete, because think about being an athlete. It's not like being a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher. There's a very limited, space. There's a very limited window for you to achieve, everything that you want to in your athletic career. Now, we know what guys can do post-career and whatnot, but you got to get your money when you can get your money. So I don't fault Klay Thompson for that. But last night, to me, was the validation. While Klay's important, and Klay was critical to that dynasty, if you had to do a hierarchy in Golden State in terms of who was most responsible, who's most valuable to those 4 titles, Steph's obviously at the top. Nobody's going to argue that. I answer Draymond Green after that. I'd probably say Kerr, Klay, then Bob Myers. because you want to give Bob Myers credit. He got Kevin Durant there. Then he probably said KD, then Iguodala. You go down the list from there. But as good as Klay still is, as productive as he still is, the Warriors were going to be fine without him. As a matter of fact, Buddy Hield across the board statistically, coming off the bench, mind you, has been an objectively better player than Klay. Better shooting percentage, more points per game, plus minus, in less minutes, by the way, than one Klay Thompson come off the bench, which again, Buddy Hield, big time spark in the second half of the Warriors. Buddy gave you 14 on 6 for 13 shooting. Had an off night from 3, but that's going to happen. He's a shooter. That's going to happen. So listen, I don't know if this Warriors team is a full-blown, no question contender as currently constructed. What I do know is this. You got that guy leading the show. You got the baddest man on the planet, one of the 6 greatest players ever, not only knocking the door, just banging the door of one of the 5 greatest players ever. I think Steph's a title away from indisputably passing Magic Johnson in terms of longevity, changing the game. Steph can just do things that Magic and frankly most guys that have ever played the sport can do. So as long as you got Steph in his prime, which he still is, you're good. As long as you got Draymond at the end of his prime, you're good. Steve Kerr, good. I still wouldn't mind. I don't know if this is sustainable over the course of a season. Certainly playing 11 to 12 guys isn't, but I wouldn't mind if they were to sub in some of those guys for a more impact player, for a guy where if Steph doesn't have it going like he did in the last 3 minutes of last night, which Steph, listen, more times than not, Steph's going to come up clutch. For crying out loud, he won Clutch Player of the Year and saved America's bacon against Serbia and then against France in the Olympics. He more times than not obviously comes through, but when he doesn't, who can you rely on? I love Jonathan Kuminga. He's not quite there yet. Buddy Hield's the man. Kind of a spot-up shooter, can score off the dribble, but not terribly consistently. You're going to need to get that other guy. And I think, again, there's a dude in Milwaukee who's playing for a really terrible basketball team, a really old basketball team, a poorly coached basketball team. Just saying, maybe, strap on some draft picks, he might be able to land them. I'm not saying, but I am saying. So, listen, great win for the Warriors, a validation of Steph and Draymond, and a validation of the front office for saying, because one of the narratives was, oh, you got to be loyal to Klay. You got to be loyal to winning first. And the reality is Steph Curry Steph Curry is different because he's been there from the jump. Obviously, Steph was the building block that started the process of the Warriors dynasty. We know this, but Steph can still help you win. Matter of fact, Steph can be the guy to lead you to bigger and better things come playoff time. You got to be loyal to that. You got to be loyal to winning first, loyalty second. So, if Klay was still the old Klay, he'd still be a Warrior today, I think. Matter of fact, I think he would have signed an extension well before 2024 free agency, but that's how it played out. Wishing Klay, obviously, nothing but the best in Dallas. Don't want him to beat the Warriors ever, but a validation of Steph, Draymond, and the Warriors front office. And let me tell you something right now. That babyface assassin, woo! There's special things in the basketball's hands. I know that for sure. All right, did want to transition, though, to the NFL. We're in mid-November. So we're kind of getting to that point. We're ending week 11. Predict Commanders, Eagles later in the show. We're to that point in the season where we kind of know who these teams are. We have a pretty good general sense of who these teams are. I'm actually going to rank my top 10 teams in football in about 45 minutes from now. But I want to talk about the Chicago Bears because they just fired their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldren, earlier this week. And this comes after Chicago put together 3 of the worst offensive performances you'll see. So coming off a bye, mind you, and usually come off a bye, you're playing your best football. The best coaches, I say, the Reeds, the McVays, the Shanahans, the Tomlins, those guys are almost unbeatable off a bye. Well, Matt Eberflus is not exactly in that category, and the Bears since have scored on offense 15, 9, and 3. So they've gotten demonstrably worse week after week after 6 points exactly worse week after week this year. 3 points against the Patriots defense, which New England has a culture of defense, but still, that's at home. That's unacceptable. And they got a game at home this week, but against the Packers. Again, we talk about teams off a bye. Matt LaFleur off a bye. Not loving the Bears' chances in that spot. But it goes to something to me where Chicago's made their biggest mistake. And we can show you what Caleb has done. And we're going to divide this into 3. First 3 games, next 3 games, and then the most recent 3 games, what Caleb Williams has done. It's been a roller coaster. First 3 games, he had a passer rating of 65, which is awful. Next 3 games, 119, which is incredible. Last 3 games, back down to around 64, 65. Terrible. So it's been a roller coaster. It's been up and down and down and up for Caleb Williams. So we'll see how he gets on track with the new offensive play caller. We'll see This is something that I think, and listen, listen, the folks that have watched the show know I am about as high on Caleb Williams' long-term potential as anybody. I've said he's the best prospect in this draft since Andrew Luck. I think the arm strength, the mobility, all these things, the accuracy needs to improve. There's no question about that. Caleb, the accuracy has just been off all season long, and at times it would be sporadic at USC. But you see with these quarterbacks, two prime examples being Jaden Daniels and being, to a lesser degree, obviously, Bo Nix with an offensive coaching staff. You see the fact that with Jaden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury, history with, by the way, has a history of Caleb Williams, history of being successful with young quarterbacks. So does Sean Payton. I don't know. He coached one of the greatest ever, Drew Brees. When Drew Brees' career looked like it was teetering on the rocks, then the man retires with every record known to man. At the time, he retires before Brady broke them all. But Brees was great. Having Sean Payton didn't hurt matters. There's no question about that. And frankly, Sean Payton helped revitalize Russell Wilson's career to where he could be a better product with my Pittsburgh Steelers at this point. Is that you might say, well, what about Drake May? Listen, Drake May going to a defensive culture certainly is not advantageous, and certainly with those weapons. No, that's why I've been quite impressed by what I've seen from Drake May. But it isn't the Belichick coaching staffs. It's not a situation where New England is just an abject mess like it was the end with Belichick, and really throughout the end of the Tom Brady era. Brady was just carrying them to championships at the end. Is that you don't have that organizational stability at the end of New England at the end of Belichick's term, New England, that you have now. Not to a great degree, but to a better degree, the Bill had. You look at recent NFL history. You can go to a defensive head coach. Like, there's been a narrative for years that, defensive head coaches can't be successful in the NFL. That's not true. That is not true. I will say this, though. Defensive head coaches can't be successful in the NFL unless, I'm talking about championship successful, can hoist Lombardi Trophy successful, unless they have in today's NFL, a brilliant offensive play caller. So like the Houston Texans, you say, well, they've got DeMeco Ryans. Why has he been successful? Because DeMeco is a great coach, no question. But having Bobby Slovic helps. Like, let's just be honest, defensive coaches tend to just have a blind spot to the modern offensive game. Because defense is not to crap on the schematics of the situation. There's no question that it's, some of Belichick's game plans back in the day were just insane. Back in his time with the Giants against Buffalo, we've seen some of Belichick's game plans, but they've been incredible. But a lot of defense is effort related, is blow-ish up related. Whereas offense is, I've always compared offense, it's like a ballet to a certain degree, right? There's a choreography of offense that there just isn't to defense. It's just two ideological differences. That's why a defensive coach, that's why Mike Tomlin, look at the Steelers now, they got Arthur Smith. Tomlin can take care of the rest. Long as Arthur Smith's got the offense, Tomlin's good. Tomlin can handle the defense. Tomlin can put together the game plans. He can handle the motivation and setting that standard in Pittsburgh. Well, the Bears are the worst of both worlds because Shane Waldren was not creative. By the way, something that's really troubling about Caleb Williams, the last 3 games where we just showed you has a passer rating of 64, 0 interceptions. How does a man have a passer rating in the mid-60s with 0 interceptions? They're not letting him throw it deep. They got conservative. Somehow, some way, they saw Caleb Williams in that stretch, again, albeit against the Jaguars and the Panthers. Bad teams, I get that. But where he's slinging it all over the yard, he's making plays out of the pocket and yada, yada, yada. And somehow they saw the tape, said, yeah, less of that. We don't want him to do those things. Now, Caleb does deserve blame. Caleb has, as bad as that Bears O-line is, and it is awful. I thought it improved after last year. It is not. Caleb some of these sacks are self-inflicted, trying to make plays in and out of the pocket, trying to do stuff that you just can't do with Chicago Bears that you could do with the USC Trojans. We understand the difference in college and NFL in that regard. But coming back to the coaches, it's the worst of both worlds. Uncreative OC Shane Waldren, bad defensive coach in Eberflus. And by the way, a head coach that I think the locker room from Caleb Williams on down has lost all respect for is you've got a situation. I think because of the play calling late in that Commanders game, followed by to cap off the game with the Hail Mary, the Jaden Daniels Hail Mary, I think it was over from there. I think Chicago players were like, okay, this is it. I'm done with this. I'm selling my stock, psychologically speaking, on this coach. And I've always said, You can lose games. If you lose the locker room, it's over. You almost never get that back. So I think Eberflus should have been fired. Listen, I know folks are calling for Ryan Poles' job. I think Poles generally has done a good job at accumulating talent. The coaches just aren't putting him in the best position to be successful. So, listen, Chicago sees at this point, I thought they'd be the last team in the NFC. They're sitting there at 4-5. You look at those Chicago's upcoming schedule. It is absolutely brutal the rest of the season, okay? Listen to this. Home for Green Bay, home for Minnesota, at the Lions, at the Niners, at the Vikings, home for the Lions, home for the Seahawks, at the Packers. I'm not saying they're going to go winless. They can win some of these games. But it feels like 6-11, 7-10 feels pretty likely at this point. Listen, we'll see what the new offensive play calling entails, but I don't know. I mean, the playbook's the same. You can't change everything schematically in a week. So I think if I'm Chicago, if I'm Ryan Poles, if I'm this ownership group, listen, I know the Bears, their identity has been defense first, and Dick Kahn, the 85 Bears. I get that. Ben Johnson in division. You go get that guy. Because what they need, there's different stylistic fits that these teams need. So I think the Eagles are uber talented. I think we all agree with that. Eagles are having an excellent regular season. None of us trust their coaching. None of us. I don't trust Sirianni. I certainly don't trust Kellen Moore. Now, defensive coordinator, what's his name? Fangio has done a really good job. Offensive coordinator and head coach, don't trust. You bring in Mike Vrabel, tying some of those screws out, bring in a level of discipline. Philly needs a Mike Vrabel. In Chicago, they got the defense thing down. They just need some creativity on offense. I think Ben Johnson would bring that to the table in a very major way. So, listen, those that are already off the bat selling stock on Caleb Williams, I think are making a grave mistake, to put it mildly. So I think they're in good shape after the season. But the Eberflus thing has not worked for the job. I was a little bit surprised they retained him after last year. Need to get Caleb some creative offensive play. I mean, even Mahomes, I love Mahomes. But to put it mildly, understatement of the year, having Andy Reid hasn't hurt. Having Travis Kelce hasn't hurt matters. I think he's got the weapons of Chicago. Just the coaching is nothing short of atrocious. As is the offensive line. That's going to be the first thing they address. I mean, love Rome Odunze. Think he's going to be a really good player. Why they didn't take an offensive lineman, I'm not quite sure. So there you go. All right. Be back in a minute. We're just getting started on Carving Up Live. Chime in the comments section. I want to know what you guys think about my takes. But be back in a minute for Carving Up the Context on Carving Up Live. Be back in just a second. We'll see you then. Welcome back to Carving Up Live. So we do a segment every Wednesday in the middle of the show. It's called Carving Up the Context. Basically, I take a story, a something that's going on in the world of sports. I try and look a little bit deeper, dig a little bit further than what is on the surface. That Rams-Dolphins game was one of the ugliest games that I've seen this season. It was, listen, the Dolphins, kudos to them. They win the game 23-15. They outplayed LA pretty much from the start. Creative offensive first drive defensively was good. Ugly. There's one stretch of the first half where combined between both teams, there were 3 consecutive drives that ended in turnovers. It was a mess. Nonetheless, Dolphins get the win. They, in theory, keep their playoff hopes alive. But to me, that's not the story. I think the Rams will be fine. I'm not worried about them long term. The Dolphins, I'm still not particularly high on. I think they're going to miss the playoffs. That, to me, is not the story. The story is something that I saw with Tua, and you're going to be like, what did you see with Tua? Did he try to get concussed again? No, actually not that. I'll detail it more. Something I saw with Tua, and I think it's indicative of some of the poorly run teams around the NFL. You're going to want to stay tuned for this. So, as head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, who might make the college football playoff, Mr. Primetime Deion Sanders says, "Give me my theme music." On this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, we're going to be talking about a trend I'm seeing around the National Football League that I think it needs to get a little bit more attention and needs to be factored in more as it relates to paying quarterbacks high dollar. So when it comes to paying your quarterbacks, there's some guys that make it easy. You're going to pay Mahomes, you're going to pay Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. You're going to pay these guys. I remember when Lamar thing was going on, it was like, why in God's name are the Ravens not paying this guy? What are we? Listen, he has his failings in the playoffs, but come on, the guy wins 75% of his games and his MVPs on his shelf. Like, what are we talking about? Generally, it's easy to pay those guys. It's going to be pretty easy for the Texans to pay CJ Stroud. We know the situation. But there's certain guys that's not universal across the board. Oh, well, maybe you should wait another year. Or just straight up, let that guy hit the market and see what he's worth. There's many folks in the three camps that say that any of the following, Tua Tagovailoa, Dak Prescott, and Trevor Lawrence, should be in said category. Either in the, let's give it another year before we pay him, or if he's got 1 year left on his deal, if any of these guys have 1 year left, let him test the market. Let's see what we got here. Now, as it turned out last offseason, all of them got paid. Tua, Trevor got paid somewhere around $55 million. Dak got paid $60. And I defended all the organizations. Now, y'all know I love Dak. That's my guy. Been a Dak fan from the jump. I think he's far better than he gets credit for. I think he's playing in a trash franchise, which kind of fits into what we're about to talk about. And I've been a Trevor Lawrence fan for similar reasons, even though I don't think Trevor is as good as Dak. Tua, I've not been as high on, but I think he fits into this tier, and here's why. All three of them have different flaws in different ways. Trevor, at times, love him, can be a god-awful decision maker and inaccurate with the deep ball. Dak, love him, he's had some rough moments in the playoffs. And Tua is just objectively awful in cold weather. They all have big-time flaws that could potentially prevent you from going on a deep playoff run. And all three of the franchises that paid them had to pay them. I'll explain why. I think the data and evidence supports itself pretty darn well. Let's look at this year, because all three of these guys have been hurt in different stages. Now, Trevor's missed 1 game. He's going to probably miss more. Dak's out for the rest of the season. He's missed 1 game. Obviously going to miss more. Tua missed a stretch of games. He's back. Let's look at the numbers of these, not necessarily the players, but of the teams when these guys are in the lineups. We could show you, okay? Poorly run franchises with their franchise quarterback. You look at those right now, and I'll read it for those that are listening. Not terribly impressive. All three teams essentially average 21 a game. Dolphins are 2-3 without Tua this year, 2-3 with Tua this year. Cowboys are 3-5 with Dak. Jaguars are 2-7 with Trevor. That's not exactly eye-popping. That's not exactly going to make you say, oh, obvious decision to pay those guys big-time franchise quarterback money. Yeah, that's until you look at what they are without. They go from not great to, holy cow, that's bad. Dolphins go from 21 points per game and 2-3 record to 10 points a game, less than half, and a 1-3 record in those games. And that 1 win came scoring 15 points against the Jacoby Brissett-led Patriots. The Cowboys, 1 game in, but I think this trend will continue. They go from averaging 21 a game to 6 without Dak Prescott, and obviously an 0-1 record. Many more ticks are going to fall into that right category, the loss category, as the season piles up. And the Jaguars, who averaged 21 with Trevor, average a third of that, 7, and they have an 0-1 record. What does that mean? Is that neither of these three are perfect. Again, I'm higher on Dak than both of these guys. I'm higher on Dak than most. But just for the sake of this conversation, for the sake of carving up the context is pretty simple. When you have 3 franchises, Jacksonville, Miami, Dallas, that don't have a history of, at least recent, in the last 25 years, of drafting horribly well relative to the title contending teams, the Chiefs, the Niners, the Patriots back in the day, prior to Belichick taking full control, used to draft well. The Niners have drafted well. The Steelers have drafted well. The Packers have drafted well. When you look at these franchises and then compare them to Dallas, Miami, and Jacksonville, and you get a guy at that position, you say, well, what about Dallas? They got Tony Romo. Yes, he was undrafted. If they thought Tony Romo was good, they would have drafted him. And he was developed by 2 guys who are nowhere near that franchise now in Sean Payton, the offensive coordinator, and Bill Parcells. Obviously, he was the head coach at the time. So Tony Romo, I consider luck. Dak, I consider luck. When you get a Dak, a Trevor, a Tua, flawed players in their own ways. But then you look at the alternatives. You look at the reality that, I don't know, we can't find quarterbacks other than these guys. I mean, do we really have a choice? Because my thing in the NFL and in sports has always been this. The best place to be in sports, pretty honest. At the top, contending for championships, and being in that conversation year after year. The second best place is not in the middle. It's in the cellar. It's as one of the worst teams in your particular sport, not nowhere near contention, and there's nowhere to go but up. So you have a direction. The worst place to be in sports is in the middle. That's, over the last few years, basically where these teams have been. At or near, closer to in the case of the Jaguars, close to the bottom in the middle, but mostly they made the playoffs. Trevor should have made it last year had Trevor not gotten injured, but kind of in the middle in the years that he didn't have the worst coach of football, Urban Meyer. Dolphins, kind of in the case, they've not won any playoff games with Tua. The case with Dak the last few years, one playoff win with him. But then you look and it's like, well, our history shows we can't draft quarterbacks. Our history shows we're not great. Dolphins ain't got a solid coach in McDaniel, but I think he's got some limitations as it pertains to adjustments, similar to his old boss, Kyle Shanahan. We don't have a history of hiring great coaches. We don't draft well. I don't know. At least it'll sell tickets. It'll put us maybe every other year, every third year, be like, hey, Jacksonville's interesting. I mean, last year, at this time, folks, the Jaguars were in the race for the 1 seed. Same with the Dolphins last year. The Cowboys, Dak was en route to winning MVP before Lamar Jackson went crazy in the last month of the season. Every third year, you look at like, oh, okay, look at Trevor, look at Tua, look at Dak. Look at the Cowboys and the Jags and the Dolphins. They're relevant. We're talking about them. They make Bryson's best 10s, throughout the course of the season. Stephen A. talks about them, and Cowherd talks about them, and you're talking about these teams. And then you have years like this year where the quarterback goes down for any period of time, and they're really bad. Like, really bad. Dallas, I think, without Dak, is the single worst team in professional football, bar none. Jacksonville's pretty close now that Mac Jones is the starter. Miami looks something in that ballpark, despite having Tyreek and Waddle without Tua Tagovailoa. Is that we rip Tua, we rip Trevor, we rip Dak for various reasons. But when their franchises don't have them, dear God, are they unwatchable. They struggle to break 10 points, literally. Show those numbers again. Without those guys, Dolphins average 10 exactly on the dot without Tua this year. Cowboys average 6. Jaguars average 7. Like, that's where we're at. That's the reality. So I think this needs to be a factor for teams moving forward. Teams that are considering, paying their quarterback who they have questions about. Are we sure? Should we give him the money? All these different scenarios. If he's won games, if he's made the playoffs, if he's won a playoff game, which Dak and Lawrence have done, Tua looking to do at some point in his career, and you don't get good quarterbacks other than that, if that's the best guy you've had in X amount of years, you almost have an obligation to keep him. I mean, you do. So I think that's something that teams have to consider moving forward when it comes to paying their franchise quarterbacks. As controversial as it is, as much as it eats up your salary cap and potentially limits what you can do because you're not well run, what's the alternative? Winning 4 games and being at the top of the draft every year, and the only time they talk about you is during the draft process and seeing which quarterback you're going to try for the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 7th time. So, this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, as uncomfortable as it may be, guys like Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, you kind of have to pay them. At least recent history would show that. So I think it's got to be in consideration with franchises moving forward. And listen, I get that sort of flies in the face of my theory. Like, for example, let's use Seattle, for example. Geno Smith. Folks that watch the show know I'm not crazy high. I've always thought the last few years Geno's a good quarterback. I've never thought he was as good as his number 1 passer rate in the league in 2022 would indicate. Then folks are like, why aren't you high on Geno? It's like, I don't know why should I be high on Geno as it relates to being somewhere in that top 12 to 15 category. I'm not even sure he's quite there. Seattle does have a history of getting pretty good quarterbacks. Russell Wilson was very successful in Seattle. They won a Super Bowl there, went to another one, was an integral part in them getting there. Hasselbeck, that was more of a Sean Alexander team, but Matt Hasselbeck was a pretty good quarterback. Seattle in the 21st century has had one solid one in Hasselbeck and one really, really good one in Russell. I have confidence, given the institutional knowledge of the Seahawks franchise, John Schneider, all these guys, they can get another one. Maybe they'll fail in the next one they get, because I think Seattle should draft a quarterback this year. Maybe it doesn't work, but they have a history of doing it recently in the last 25 years. Miami doesn't, Dallas doesn't, Jacksonville darn sure doesn't. So I think all those things need to be taken into consideration. So there you go. All right. Another segment we do every Wednesday. It's called Bryce's Best 10. It's pretty simple. I rate my top 10 teams, and I rate my top 10 anything throughout the course of the calendar year, but because we're in the NFL season, we've got to talk about NFL teams. My top 10 teams in the National Football League headed into Week 11. So let's get started. Bryce's Best 10, Week 11 starts right now. Here we go. All right. Bryce's Best 10. So we didn't do a segment last week because there was no show on Wednesday. I did uploaded Bryce's Best 10 to Instagram, my top 10 team in the league to Instagram. You see right there, that was my top 10 in Week 10. Obviously, we've had changes coming into Week 11. At number 10, forget this season, for the first time ever in the history of the segment, Bryce's Best 10, it is... Welcome to the segment, Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, are the 10th best team in the National Football League, and here's why. Shout out to Arizona. Kyler Murray playing exceptional football, staying away from the turnovers, the explosive play with his arm, with his legs. This Cardinals team could run the football with the best of them against the Jets, which, albeit the Jets are a terrible franchise. They ran for $147, and if my notes serves me correctly, 3 touchdowns. But Arizona, the last 4 games, 4-game winning streak. Listen, this is a team that's playing its best football at the best time. And I should say the best time. You want to carry this into December. But Jonathan Gannon, listen, they got off to a rough start last year. Kyler wasn't there. Once Kyler came back, remember they upset my Steelers on the road. They upset Philly, screwed up Philly's entire season on the road when Philly was playing terrible football. They've seemed to kind of carry that momentum. Got up to the rough start, lost some close games to Buffalo, which they could have easily won. But they step in the last 4 weeks. They've established a run game. Kyler's been good. Jonathan Gannon is a defensive coach. Defense in Arizona has been really, really good over the last 4 games in this winning streak. Listen, the NFC West, the most competitive division of football right now. Any of the 4 teams can end up winning that thing. Arizona's playing the best of the 4 right now. Again, this is obviously going to be a team a little bit higher than them. But the Cardinals, welcome to the segment, guys. Top 10, 10th best team in the National Football League. Okay, this team, I had to put them in reluctantly because I can't argue with the data. I kept him out for a while. I'll let him back in. You know what? Even though I hate him, I'll let him back in. At number 9, for the first time on Bryce's Best 10 this season, it is, all right, the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course. Thank you. Good job, guys. Philadelphia Eagles, 9th best team in the National Football League. And here is why. So folks are like, Bryson, you're hating. Why don't you have him higher? Well, here's why I don't have him higher. They're on a 5-game, 5-game winning streak. I apologize. Wins over the Deshaun Watson-led Browns, Daniel Jones-led Giants, Joe Burrow and the Bengals, a solid win on the road. The Trevor Lawrence, who struggled in this game, led Jaguars, and the Cooper Rush-led Dallas Cowboys. Their upcoming schedule, I think, will really tell them who they are. They're going to play a game tomorrow night, which I'll predict at the end of the show, against the Commanders. Then they got the Rams, they got the Ravens, Steelers later this season. So they've got some games that are going to kind of test them. But the fact of the matter is, Jalen Hurts, who had a major turnover problem all of last year, bleeding into the first 4 or so games of this year, all of a sudden has kind of cleaned that up. Saquon Barkley has been a man amongst boys when it comes to the running game. Philly, even though they're not the offensive line they used to be with Jason Kelsey, still has been exceptional in their run blocking, their pass blocking. AJ Brown just brings a new dynamic to this offense. You look at Philadelphia with and without AJ Brown, it's like 2 different football teams entirely. AJ's playing great football. Devontae Smith, the best number 2 receiver in the game in my eyes. And by the way, this defense, which I have major questions about, Vic Fangio's kind of fixed it. Now, again, they played either bad quarterbacks or quarterbacks on average to bad teams. but they've been solid. And listen, we saw what Cincinnati did to Baltimore, scoring 34. Philly held them to half that at home in Cincinnati, 17. So this is an excellent defense that's playing good football. That, to me, more than anything, because I knew this offense was talented, is why they're in this list. But the Philadelphia Eagles, credit where it's due, are the 9th best team in the National Football League. At number 8, staying at the same spot they were at last week, it is the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners are the 8th best team in the National Football League. And here's why. I said on Monday, and I still stand by it, that win over Tampa was, there's no such thing as a bad win. All wins are good wins. That's the whole point of you play to win the game, as the great Herm Edwards once said. That said, least impressive win arguably this NFL season. So you go into Tampa. Tampa's on a short week. You're on a bye week. Baker's without his top 2 weapons, and that sucker comes down to a game-winning field goal by Jake Moody, who had missed 3 field goals prior to that. Listen, Kyle Shanahan, love the guy, top 3 coach, top 5 coach in the National Football League, an offensive wizard. His almost just blatant disregard of special teams is truly appalling. I can't quite wrap my arms around it. The mistakes at the end of the Rams game, the missed field goals against Tampa Bay could have easily cost them. Listen, Christian McCaffrey didn't look like quite like himself. It's his first game in since February. So Christian's going to work his way back in the lineup. He's going to be great. He's going to get, you're going to have a fresh Christian McCaffrey for this stretch run for the Niners, which is bad news for the rest of their opponents. Brock Purdy was really good against Tampa. I've actually been more impressed with Purdy this year than a year ago, given some of the injuries that the Niners have dealt with. George Kittle's still awesome. I still trust his defense. Nick Bosa's playing great football. He needs to bring down Baker Mayfield, when a 6-foot Baker Mayfield stiff-armed him, for crying out loud. But Niners still have a ton of talent. Like where they're at right now, they are the 8th best team in the National Football League. At number 7, actually fallen 3 spots in large part because of what the teams ahead of them did. It is the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are the 7th best team in the National Football League, and here's why. Listen, it feels unfair to punish a team the way I punished Green Bay after being on a bye. And the fact that I think they're going to go in Chicago, I think they're in good shape. The Packers have pretty much owned the Bears throughout the course of the 21st century. But the thing I worry about with Green Bay is, love Jordan Love. I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the game. Jordan, you got to cut down the turnovers. Now, maybe he does. Maybe that's something that the Packers and Matt LaFleur and others have kind of worked with him on. Maybe that's something you can't cut turnovers completely out of your game if you want to be a successful QB. It's what I bashed the Bears with and how they've coached Caleb in the last 3 games. But just the ill-advised, low reward, high risk throws that just aren't going to allow you to become the offense you're capable of being with what I think is the deepest young wide receiving core in the National Football League. Dobbs, Wicks, Watson, Reed. You got all these guys. You got a great tight end in Tucker Kraft. You've got the running game. By the way, it looks like Marshawn Lloyd, who I loved at USC, might be coming back this week and giving the Green Bay Packers some extra, insurance in that backfield. This offensive line's great. Defense is good. I need to see a little bit more from the defense in a game against Detroit, albeit it's Detroit, but at home. But I still like where the Packers are at. I just was more impressed by the teams that I put ahead of them this week. That's why the Green Bay Packers are the 7th best team in the National Football League. At number 6, moving up a spot from last week, it is the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are the 6th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So with Baltimore, they are so different than what they were a year ago. So they were obviously one of the top offenses of the game last year. I mean, their best offensive player won league MVP, Lamar Jackson. Their running game was great, all those things. That actually has been way better than last year. Lamar's playing the best football he's ever played in his entire career. You can make a strong case. You can say the same about one Derrick Henry, who's quieted down a little bit, but is still the same Derrick Henry that we've grown accustomed to and who's put fear into many NFL defenses. Speaking of defenses, theirs does not put fear into anybody. The Ravens across the board are the single worst pass defense in the National Football League, and that's concerning to me. I mean, if this was the same defense with Mike McDonald, who's obviously now the head coach in Seattle, if this was the same Mike McDonald defense that it was a year ago, make a strong case the Ravens are the best or second best team in the league, because the defense kind of pulls them down. It's kind of the anchor, that is pulling this Ravens team down. They're going to have to win games via shootout. They're going to have to win these 31-28 or 34-31 type games in order to make a run if they don't shore up that side of the football. It concerns me. With that said, Lamar's been unreal. Lamar with his legs, with his arm, he's been efficient. He had a game recently with a perfect passer rating. I think it was against Denver, playing great football. The Ravens are, let's put it this way, you don't want them to be your first playoff opponent. I mean, the Ravens culture organization are going to put fear into you. I need to obviously see a lot more from Lamar in the postseason. That said, he's been playing great, judging what they are now, and certainly what I think they can be moving forward. The Ravens are the 6th best team in the National Football League. At number 5, staying where they're at from last week, it is a team I love all season long, the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are the 5th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So, you look at LA, you're like, Bryson, how on earth do they make the top 5? Look at the Chargers schedule. Who's their best win this season? The last 3 games, they've beaten the Titans and they've beaten the Saints, and they've beaten some pretty average Cleveland, average to terrible football teams. Here's what I would pose, though. Look at the teams the Chargers have lost to. They lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers with a beat-up and, as it turned out for the 4th quarter, Justin Herbert. They lost to that Steelers team. The next week, they lost the Kansas City Chiefs with, basically their entire roster hurt. Both tackles, defense, the whole shebang. They lose to the Arizona Cardinals. Did not like what I saw at all from them offensively in that game. That said, in the last 3 games, they've seemed to establish a passing game. Quentin Johnson is, I guess, not a bust now. He's been great. The Chargers' running game is as strong as there is in football. Still really like their defense. Jim Harbaugh is doing Jim Harbaugh things. He's turned the franchise around in a heartbeat. I think this LA team is going to be scary. You do not want to face them in the playoffs whatsoever. They were my preseason pick to face the Chiefs in the AFC title game. Still think that's on the board. The Chargers, with Justin Herbert, by the way, who's balling as of late, are the 5th best team in the National Football League. At number 4, it's my team, baby. The highest they've ever been on this list. The Pittsburgh Steelers are the 4th best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So wait a second. Bryce, 4th? The Mount Rushmore of Bryce's best 10? 100%. I'll explain exactly why. But I obviously mentioned the top 2 teams ahead, and you can pretty much guess who they are at this point. Take them out and look at the rest of the contenders of the AFC. Yeah, Baltimore's defense is literally awful, as I just talked about. As great as their offense is, which, by the way, the Steelers are playing not that far behind what Baltimore's doing. And by the way, we're going to get to see it play out in front of us on Sunday in Pittsburgh, PA, and see which team is truly better. Maybe I'll be wrong, but we're going to see it play out. The Chargers, albeit beat up Justin Herbert, but they did beat. You talk about teams, throughout the rest of the conference, they're objectively playing better defensively. Russell Wilson has brought a new dynamic to this offense with a deep ball. Adding Mike Williams, listen, he's staying on that red line now. Kudos to him. Game-winning touchdown that game. You got one of the best run games of football. Najee Harris, Jalen Warren. O-line is playing. Well, they're still not playing that great. The Steelers are mostly relying on the run game and short passes from Russ. But you got the best defensive player in the game, TJ Watt. You got one of the 5 best coaches in football in Mike Tomlin. Listen, the Steelers are able to get the 2 seed. I don't think they're going to get the 1 seed, but if they get the 2 seed, 3 seed, this team can make a deep playoff run. They finally have an identity on offense thanks to Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson and those weapons that they've got. Steelers are scary. You name me, other than the top 2 teams I'm about to mention in the AFC, you name me a team that is objectively, clearly playing better football than the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I will agree with you, but I have not seen it this year. The Steelers, my Steelers, are the 4th best team in the National Football League. At number 3, staying where they've been the last few weeks, it is the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are the 3rd best team in the National Football League, and here is why. So, by the way, that Bills-Chiefs game is just getting better and better by the day. That game's going to be in Orchard Park, New York. But listen, you got a Bills team that I said it was a controversial take coming into the season, but I think I'm being pretty much validated by that. I think this is the best Bills team in the Josh Allen era. I really do, because of how many different ways they can beat you. Right? The last few years, it was Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, maybe the defense shows up, maybe they don't, and see where we go from there. Now, again, I still have questions about Sean McDermott in the playoffs. I've called him often, and I love Mark Jackson, but the Mark Jackson of the NFL, in that he's a great developmental coach, great culture builder. Can he get you to that next level? Maybe they can this year. I like what I've seen from Buffalo's defense. Offensively, listen, Josh Allen didn't have the greatest of games throwing the football, but he was great running against the Indianapolis Colts. The Bills have been on an absolute roll, winning their last 5 games. If they're able to beat Kansas City, there's a case they might end up being the best team on Bryce's best 10 next week. They're playing exceptional. Josh Allen has almost completely, last week notwithstanding, cut out the turnovers. James Cook's been great. They've established a run game. Best O-line by far that Josh Allen's had in his career. And by the way, Amari Cooper's about to come back. They could get Dalton Kincaid back. So to score 30 on albeit a bad Colts defense, but to score 30 in Indianapolis without many of your weapons gone, I thought was really impressive in winning by double digits. The Bills are the 3rd best team in the National Football League. And let's just go to coronation time. This is the top two teams in the NFL. I've had them there literally, God is my witness, since week 1 of this season. At number 2, it's the team that's going to win the NFC, the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell, what do y'all keep doing to teams week after week after week?
Kneecap.
Just buying kneecaps all over the place right now, man. Detroit goes to Houston. All right, Jared Goff throws 5 picks. They trail by 15 points, and they win. Folks, a comeback like that has never happened since 1970. This is historic stuff. For those that don't believe me, Bears Colts, 1970. Last time a team turned the ball over 5 or more times, trailed by 15 or more points, and won the football game. That's what Detroit did. They did it with their run game. They did it with their improved defense, which even without Aiden Hutchinson has been great. Aaron Glenn has done it. Listen, we talk about Ben Johnson, who's a wizard, who's going to be a head coach next year. We need to start talking about Aaron Glenn, about him potentially being a head coach next year. Detroit Lions fans don't want to hear that. They don't want to lose their top 2 coordinators, obviously. But what I love just about everything about this team. I think they're the best roster in football, top to bottom. But Jared Goff can play the worst game he's played all season by far, and they could beat a beat up Texas team, but still a Texas team on the road when trailing by 16 points and turn the ball over 5 times. That shows you the number of ways they can beat you, the fight in this team. Dan Campbell has this team regardless of the opponent. It could be a 1 o'clock kickoff against Tennessee. It could be a Sunday night game against the Texans. It could be a big 4:25 Eastern game against the Cowboys or the Packers on the road. He has them ready to go every single week because that's what the great coaches do. I think the Lions have been absolutely unbelievable. They are clearly, to me, the second best team in the NFL, and they are clearly, to me, going to go to the Super Bowl. By the way, Zadarius Smith has not played a snap for them this year. He's definitely going to make an impact. Lions are the second best team in the National Football League. And some of you have heard this one before. At number 1, the team that's going to win the AFC and the team that I think is going to win their 3rd straight Super Bowl. It is the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, shocker, are the best team in the National Football League. And here's why. Oh, but Bryson, they scored 16 points. They needed a blocked field goal. Shut up. First of all, when a missed field goal, let's get that out of the way. It's not like Will Lutz shanked it right or you pushed it left, pulled it right. No. Kick got blocked. It's all 3 phases of the game. And this is what Kansas City does, is when one phase of their operation is down, the other picks them back up. See, a couple weeks ago against Tampa Bay, defense didn't have their best day at the office. Baker Mayfield was doing Baker Mayfield things, going up and down the field, just gaming like he does. Patrick Mahomes said, hey, it's okay. I got you. I'm just going to drive us, put together scoring drive after scoring drive in the 4th quarter and overtime. I'm going to be masterful on 3rd down, which this Chiefs team, best team in the NFL on 3rd down this season. Listen, Travis Kelce has started to find more and more of a rhythm as time has gone on. DeAndre Hopkins, again, starting to find his place in this offense. Pacheco could potentially be back this week. I was reading that he potentially could play this year. That would be interesting. That would really bring back some explosiveness to this Chiefs offense. The defense is arguably the best in football. I think I saw a stat. They haven't allowed 27 or 28 points in like 30 games or something. Like, this defense is outstanding and has played as such over the course of the last couple of seasons. And the special teams, best kicker in the league, and obviously the best kick block team in the league as well. Listen, they've won 15 straight and they haven't lost since Christmas. Call me when the Chiefs lose a game. Otherwise, they're going to be at number 1 for some time. The Kansas City Chiefs are the best team in the National Football League. So let's check the rankings. Those of you might have missed a segment, we'll just go and put it up on the screen for you right there. So we'll go from 10 to 1. The Cardinals, first time they've ever been this list. Congratulations to them. The Eagles, first time they've been on the list this season. Yeah, no congrats for the Philadelphia Eagles. I ain't going to do that. Number 8, they got the Niners. 7 is Green Bay. 6, the Ravens. And then the top 5 from 5 to 1 is the Chargers. My Steelers, Bills. And then at the top 2, 1 and 2, which has been the same all season long, hasn't changed. The Detroit Lions at number 2, and the Kansas City Chiefs at 1. And I think they're going to meet in the Super Bowl. I feel as good as ever about that prediction. Now, of course, I hope I'm wrong on the AFC side of things. I hope my Steelers can dethrone the champs. That would be incredible. If there's one man that I know is capable of leading a squad to take down a giant, it is one Mike Tomlin. I think he's capable of doing such things. So there you go. Sorry, I'm just looking at some of these. Look at some of these. My Twitter notifications. There's apparently Deion Waiters. Remember Deion Waiters played in the NBA? Apparently he was on. Is this Gilbert Arenas' podcast? I don't know who was on, but Deion Waiters said there was something going on in the Thunder's locker room the year that they blew a 3-1 lead to my Warriors in the conference finals. Excuse me. But that is basically just said there was tension. Yeah, there was tension. We knew KD and Westbrook had tension. That's not breaking news. All right, nonetheless, let's go and get to our predictions for the Week 11 opener between the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. Big-time NFC East matchup in the city of brotherly love. The Eagles are 3.5-point favorites in the spot. So listen, Washington coming off a tough loss to my Steelers. Listen, no shame in losing to the black and yellow. It's Mike Tomlin. It's a new, revitalized Russell Wilson. There's no shame in that. Washington, you lost by a point. It happens. It happens against the best. Listen, but they're going to a red-hot Eagles team that's won 5 in a row. Philadelphia, here's the thing about the Eagles that I think is it really, really gives them a big advantage. So if you look at the last few games for Washington, they've been in some dogfights. They had a Hail Mary to beat the Bears. They were in a close game throughout. Daniel Jones actually played quite well. Finally scored a touchdown at MetLife. They were in a close game at home, on the road against the Giants, and then lost by a single point to my Steelers in a game that came down to the wire. Meanwhile, look at the Philadelphia Eagles, their last 3 games. They're out here sitting guys in the fourth quarter against Dallas, against the Bengals, the Giants. Like they've played a lot of games recently where Jalen Hurts doesn't need to throw a single forward pass in the last 15 minutes of play. So I think that's a big advantage for Philly. Now, as is the case with virtually any game the Philadelphia Eagles play, I think there's a big coaching gap. But as also is the biggest is the case in basically every game the Eagles play. Big talent gap. This is one of the most talented teams in the NFL. Saquon Barkley is doing his thing. This Washington pass defense has really had some problems, so expect a big A.J. Brown type of game. I think that's going to really help Philadelphia get the job done. I've got Philly winning this game. Close one. They do cover minus 3.5, and they win this one 28-24. They've already got a half game to lead in the division, but really kind of steal that sole spot at the top of the NFC East, which is obviously a 2-man race at this point. You got 2 of the 4 worst teams in football in that division, and then you got 2 of the 12 best teams in the NFL that is in that division. So it's definitely a top-heavy division. Let's put it that way. Giants and Cowboys are unwatchably bad, and unfortunately, we're going to have to watch them. Whoops, there we go. On Thanksgiving Day. At least we get a good Thursday night game in this one between the Eagles and the Commanders. I got Philly by a final score of 28-24 over the Washington Commanders. All right, that is all the time we have for today's show. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by. As always, be sure to catch Carving Up Live on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, or right here on Facebook, as well as the Carving Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. Of course, be sure to like, share, comment, and please take 2 seconds out of your day. Hit that big red subscribe button down there. It helps the channel grow exponentially. Please tell your friends about it, your family about it, everybody you know about Carving Up Live, except for your sleeping cat. Which I know I sound like a broken record. My cat, Neeland, has been very disrespectful over the last few days. I must say, he's I don't know if he's just trying to make his voice heard or whatever's going on. He's been quite feisty, although he's a redhead. So that's, a redheaded cat. That's to be expected. Just importantly, be sure to tell everybody you know about Carving Up Live. And just as importantly, be sure to tell everybody you know about the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network, right here on YouTube, as well as any and everywhere that you get your favorite podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, any and everywhere that you get your favorite podcasts. You can find us at the Grid Network, where we dare to be different. All right. That's all the time we have for today's show. Would love to see you guys on Friday. We'll have NFL predictions. We'll have the Vol View. Boy, as big of an addition to the Vol View as we've ever had. Tennessee, Georgia, the game in college football in Week 12 could decide who gets a spot in the SEC title game and could really potentially be an elimination game, even though it shouldn't be for Tennessee, for the college football playoff, which obviously we saw the rankings last night. Tennessee was too low. 7th? Come on now. We're better than Indiana. Oh, Indiana's 10-0. Yeah, let's see what they do against Ohio State. Let's see how they fare against the Buckeyes on the road in the horseshoe. Let's see how that plays out. That's all I'm going to say. Vol View is going to be fun. Reaction to Thursday Night Football is going to be fun. And, of course, NFL predictions is always a blast. Can't wait for it. See you then, 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific time on YouTube on Friday. Carving It Up, Grid Network. Let's go. That's what we do. So please be sure to stay safe out there. Please be sure to take care of your physical as well as your mental health. And please, 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 if you can, be sure to contact your local state representatives and senators to demand change for gun violence in America. Doesn't matter where you lean, right, left, center. This is an issue that affects every single one of us as Americans on a day-to-day basis. No matter what anybody tries to tell you, oh, it's not a problem, or oh, there's only one solution to solving this problem. Both are BS. Both are not true. It's a huge problem that needs a number of nuanced solutions to solve it. And we just had an election. We have some newly elected officials that are coming into office. Listen, just because voting's over doesn't mean making your voice heard is it. That's never over. This is the greatest country in the world. We get the right to make our voices heard. Let's make sure we contact those that are in local government all the way up to the federal level to let them know that we want our streets safe. We want to be safe from the epidemic of gun violence in this country. It's something I'm extremely passionate about. So regardless of your political affiliations, this affects all of us. So let's do what we can to address the issue. All right, see y'all on Friday. Gonna be a fun one. Stay safe out there, everybody. God bless y'all. Peace out. Good to have you back, Klay, but Steph's still the guy. Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.